Cybersecurity really isn't a technical function. It's a trust function. Trust plus clarity plus security is the real foundation. It matters even more now if we're talking ransomware, data breaches, AI-enabled fraud, social media outrage cycles. That means reputation can be damaged faster than ever. The regulators, customers, employees all react to the headlines that we see on either the news or more likely in our social media feeds, sometimes before all the facts are known. Not just did something bad happen, but how fast did that news spread? How confusing was the narrative? Did leadership look prepared or panicked?
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us for another podcast with Zenix. We are very pleased to have Randall Jackson as our guest today. Randall, why don't you introduce yourself, a little bit about your background, and introduce the firm as well?
Sure. I'm Chief Information Security Officer and head of infrastructure for Income Research and Management. We're a fixed income firm in Boston, Massachusetts. As far as background, over 30 years in the industry, I became a CISO by way of really being an engineer, right? So prior to being a CISO for a financial services firm, I spent about 25 years running MSPs and MSSPs. So way back when I was a young man, I worked on a help desk and was a field engineer and built systems and deployed them and went through the whole cloud computing craze. I call it a craze just because I think perhaps some of us might have been a little overzealous, maybe. Not that it's not legit, but I know some folks data centers don't look so bad maybe at times, especially as of late. We've had some pretty significant outages, but I digress. Got into cyber by way of being an engineer. My philosophy there was I know how to build it, I know how to troubleshoot it, I know how to break it. So therefore, I know how to secure it, right?
Very similar to my background, actually. Randall, when it comes to financial industry, it takes decades to establish that trust, to have the customers believe in the company, and then it takes one bad instance to lose all that reputation. What are your thoughts about how this trust can be established? How do you balance between the trust and the progress that's going on so fast? AI is accelerating all of this. The management and the balance between the two is somewhat difficult because you want to keep that trust with your customers. How do you do that?
Yeah, I mean, cybersecurity really isn't a technical function, really, is it? It's a trust function, right? I guess trust plus clarity plus security is that foundation. It matters even more now, I think, if we're talking ransomware, data breaches. You mentioned AI-enabled fraud, social media outrage cycles. That means reputation can be damaged faster than ever. The regulators, customers, employees all react to the headlines that we see on either the news or more likely in our social media feeds. And sometimes before all the facts are known, before things become front page and push notifications in their clients' inboxes, right? Not just did something bad happen, but how fast did that news spread? How confusing was the narrative? Did leadership look prepared or panicked? So some, tabletops are critical, and not just the technical ones, but communication. Mix up those tabletop exercises. Don't just run through the ransomware playbook or, RPO, RTO, but get non-technical people in the room, such as members of your C-suite, maybe your compliance, legal, and pick a real-world relevant scenario and see how teams are going to react. And I think it's going to be illuminating, but very quickly gaps should become evident, and then do a postmortem on that and retry it until you get it right. When the real thing happens, there's still going to be decision points to be made, audibles from the line of scrimmage, if you will, if I'm using a football analogy. But people knowing what they're supposed to be doing when they're supposed to be doing is going to be key. Obviously, we all see due diligence questionnaires and they're getting longer and more detailed and they're asking for more things. Be as transparent as you can, obviously, with those things. And if you're not meeting all of those things, build your list of gaps that you need to close. At this point, hopefully we've all got EDR and MFA and next gen firewalls, and either we have a SOC of our own or we have a partner. Um, you know, all of these basics that weren't maybe so basic a handful of years ago, have those covered. But yeah, trust is it's almost become the product, I think.
What are the challenges that you see financial industries facing? The speed of technology changes, the need to be transparent, you mentioned that as well, while having to meet regulatory compliance. What challenges do you see and how do you resolve those challenges?
I think one of the biggest challenges is you know, resource contention, meaning your organization has to operate in its, you know, its core function, what it does and does well, and what their clients are counting on them to do. In our case, is research and producing good performance on that. Obviously, you have resources allocated to regulatory compliance and all of that, but navigating those waters between okay, here's what the regulation stipulates, and then okay, is that potentially going to be impactful to our existing processes, or are we going to need to modify those in some way in order to maintain compliance as things shift or evolve without impeding performance of
Right.
your core business functions, right? To me, that's one of those challenges, and staying abreast on okay, what does this new language actually mean? In our case, obviously we have a legal team that can, a lot of it I understand very clearly, okay, they mean X or Y, but sometimes okay, explain the legalese for me in more business terms, right? Those are two challenges that come to mind right there. Your ability to remain agile and responsive
Agile, yeah.
and productive without getting mired down in, it's obviously it's not busy work, but it can shift your focus away from, your core product or service.
Building on what you just said, what is the role of CISO as well as IT in helping meeting regulatory compliance?
I can speak for myself, and I don't think I'm unique, but especially in the last handful of years, my role has become more strategic and less technical. I have to keep my hands somewhat dirty, so to speak. I don't want to be completely rusty as a technician, but I spend more time in meetings, in strategy sessions, in compliance exercises, and probably than I would have, looking at network diagrams and things of this nature, right? By the same token, I don't know that we want to get mired down completely in being nothing but a policy wonk either, right? So striking that balance between understanding the policies and the process, but also knowing what it actually means for your team to actually implement those things.
And when you want to translate the policies and strategic view, how difficult is it to map that strategy to an IT strategy, which sometimes a bit challenging because no company that I know of has enough IT resources.
Yeah, so hopefully you're aligned to a framework, NIST, ISO, what have you, which gives you your controls, but it doesn't necessarily say, okay, given your environment, whatever it may be, pick your tech stack, right? It's not going to, there isn't a direct correlation between this is this particular setting on that particular firewall or anything like that. I think that's where, in my case, and I'm sure many others like me, where they have the technical background, um, where they can meet with their technical staff and explain to them, okay, we need to accomplish X. What that looks like is, now I'm relying on my team more and more from the technical aspect of it, right? So we need to achieve X, right? Whatever X is. Let's look at how we do that technically. Sometimes, again, it's a Visio diagram or it's a whiteboard exercise where we draw pictures from one another. We need to get here. Help me connect those dots, right?
Yeah.
You have to have a good staff, or if you're outsourcing, you have to have a great partner that you trust, and you need to be able to communicate. So whatever that takes in order for you to be able to translate the regulatory or the policy language into language that IT can understand.
Okay. Let's switch gear just a little bit and talk about third party risk. In an ecosystem now these days, that's very common to consume services from the cloud. And you don't even know if that service is using three other services before it gets to you. It's the consumption of services and aggregation and integration of services to accomplish a particular task. How do you manage the third party risk?
Yeah, I mean, that's a big one, right? I think it's evolving. So, being in a regulated industry, we're going through the due diligence process for clients or potential clients all the time ourselves. In some ways, that process that we put our vendors and our third party ecosystem through is similar in that it's pretty detailed due diligence questionnaires about various controls and things that they have in place. You're going to be asking for SOC reports and pen tests reports. And some parties are more cooperative in that regard than others, perhaps. And maybe sometimes you have to be a little forceful in what you're asking for. And as you know, these things take time. Luckily, AI can help us read through a lot of these lengthy documents, summarize, and okay, these are some areas that I need to look at. So I think we have to avail ourselves to some of these technical helpers, if you will, when we can. Yeah, the third party bit, it's consuming more and more of my time and my team's time.
Let's talk about AI a little bit. Of course, AI. I don't think the day goes by, or actually, I should say an hour goes by that I don't receive something about AI.
Right.
So let's talk about that, the impact of that on the on technology, impact of that on the financial industry, and how you envision moving forward with AI. What do we do with this thing?
Yeah, well, it's multifaceted. I think a lot of those tools can help us in cyber. Obviously, it can analyze huge amounts of data in a very quick point of time, telemetry, pattern recognition, all of these things, right? For sure. Then the other side of that is governing AI usage. Auto AI, we're looking at that very hard right now ourselves. You need to discover all the AI that's in use. And I think anyone can probably relate to this and that there's much more of it than they probably realize. If they don't have a tool or a good way of looking for that, I seriously recommend researching that like right now, not next week. Like probably do that over your lunch even, right? So discovery, you need a policy in what are the approved AI tools for our organization. Maybe that answer right now is none, but I don't think that's also realistic for very long if it is none. I think you need to figure out quickly, all right, what tools are we going to allow folks in our organization to use? And it's probably not everyone, right? I imagine it has to be role based for a variety of reasons. So find all the AI, find a way to govern it quickly, who needs access to what for why, make them prove it. You need business cases. It's not just I want Copilot to write all my email for me all of a sudden. Yeah, maybe that might not be a great idea, or maybe it is, right? Your mileage may vary, as they say. And then do you have homegrown tools or LLMs? What data is that being trained on?
Right.
Who has access to it? We're all figuring this out quickly, but we've had many of these discussions internally. And I feel like we've got a good head start on that. We have a defined AI policy now ourselves. These are the tools you're allowed to use and what for. And the rest of the 3,000 or those are off limits until further notice. And, you can define a good use case and we feel good about the GRC around whatever tool that is, right? And humans make mistakes. So there's the education aspect of it. You can policy people to death, but you have to have some guardrails for the inevitable, which is, oops, I know I'm not supposed to do that. I made a mistake. And then even worse, you may have we're not supposed to do that and we did it anyway, right? So real-time redaction of PII, sensitive
Right.
information, proprietary information, those tools exist already. And DLP around those things. Maybe, like I said, that the real-time redaction is happening so that even if they did inadvertently or intentionally put some of that stuff into a prompt, you've got guardrails in place for that. So it's the AI thing. I think any one of us could probably do a 2, 4, 8 hour discussion on it, right? Because
Yeah,
there's
absolutely.
so many areas.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I just touched on a couple there.
Yeah, the other part of it that I'm concerned about is how sophisticated the attacks are becoming. When you get voice and images that it could be somebody that the CEO of a company is sending a message. How do you differentiate that from the deep fake versus real?
Yeah,
How do you manage against attacks like that?
think so. I think there's some basic stuff like, right, like you've got to have, I think, in a code word, and just like
Yeah.
guest wireless SSI, WPA keys or what have you. I think you're gonna have to rotate these code words because as people come and go, where you challenge. Okay, all right. First of all, let me rewind. Even before that, just some common sense pattern recognition has to take place first, right? The CEO has never gotten on a Teams call with me ever. And suddenly he wants to talk to me about. So I think we have to do a little bit of psychoanalysis right there, right?
But
But
that's a
let's
human.
just
But that's a human error,
that
right?
is a human error, right? But then I do think you need some challenge things. Okay, all right, CEO, you've never called me. Now you're calling me. So can you, and whatever your code phrase or whatever, maybe you challenge that. There are definitely some tells, right? There's some weird anti-aliasing that's still happening in some of these deep fakes, but not everybody knows to look for those. So I think you have to incorporate some of this stuff into your awareness training if you haven't already. Some of the platforms I think of already starting to do some of this, but I think if you're doing any human-led awareness training, and if you're not, I think you should think about it. Don't just rely on the training on the video-based platforms alone. You have to have some hybrid um, approach to that. There are also, I was at a recent conference. There are some new vendors out there that have some technological answers to some of these things. But I also think that's another realm where it's evolving and it's going to continue to evolve. Are we going to get into real time deep fake detection? Yeah, probably, right? Because there's too much incentive for someone to be looking at that. And
Right.
there may be a product already there and I'm just not aware of it, right?
Right, right. Correct. I think absolutely it's an evolving space. And I am actually talking to a lot of people to see who's doing what. And we've got a long ways to go. One of the biggest concerns that I have is I was at a conference the other day, and somebody was suggesting that, well, we go back to the old fashioned, hey, I got this. Did you call me? Or did you have a conversation rather than accepting it? So we go full circle back to the point that we just have a conversation. Hey, is this real? Are you really asking me to do this? Or have those things in place? Because until we have the tool sets that can help us automate this, we need to put guardrails in place so that we don't make mistakes, which could be very costly. When it comes to financial industry, reputation, as we started by saying that reputation is everything. And I think that it makes a huge difference. I want to talk about lessons learned a little bit. When you look back 5 years ago, financial industry, and today, financial industry, what lessons learned can you share with that could say, I didn't think about this. I should be thinking about this. This is the direction I I should be going, which I haven't taken steps to go in that direction. What are your thoughts on that?
I think a characteristic or a trait or an idiosyncrasy that I noticed, it isn't unique to finance, but I think it was prevalent in finance. I think it's changed significantly over the last, let's call it 3 to 5 years. I would say, especially in the last 2 to 3 years, is I don't know that cybersecurity was taken anywhere near as seriously 5 years ago as it is now. And that may seem ironic or maybe even bizarre for some folks to hear, but I can tell you that that just simply wasn't the case. I'm just speaking in general, the
Yes,
industry as a whole,
absolutely.
right? It's kind of seen as a bit of a cost center, and there was a lot of that. You're slowing us down. You're preventing us from getting our work done. See, it feels like overkill. It doesn't seem necessary. Maybe it's a bit overbearing, and I just don't hear much of that any longer. I think a lot of folks have learned some big names, right? Logos that are very recognizable to a lot of us have experienced, unfortunately, some pretty high profile pain. And I think collectively, the industry, the sector has learned a lot through others' pain, whether it be regulatory, where the folks were, I don't want to name drop, but we know there's a couple of really now infamous supply chain centric breaches that I think a lot of folks did a lot of, oh, wow, this is a real thing. This is a big deal. What if that happened to us, right? I think a lot of the conversations start that way. What if this were to happen to us? What would we do? I think a lot of those conversations that have been had, and as we know, that just initial, what if that happened to us conversation led to many longer, more detailed conversations, and they're light bulb moments. Oh, wow. Yeah, we need to do a lot more than we've been doing. Suddenly, budgets got freed up and things happened, and cyber postures became extraordinarily mature when you think about it in a very short period of time
Yeah.
because of it. That's a good thing. The CISO role has evolved, right? It was more, I think, back office. We'll call on you if we need you. Everything's good, right?
Yeah.
To now more, can
Been
you
there,
give
done
us
that.
right, exactly. And now
Yeah.
it's, we're giving, hopefully, we're giving detailed reports in business language. Here's what we're doing. Here's what that translates into money saved or risk averted. And here's the risk that we're still carrying, and weigh that out to how much every organization has some operational risk, right? And the calculus on that is different for everybody. But how much are we going to carry? You can boil the ocean, right, so to speak, in hopes to eliminate every conceivable risk, but I don't know that that's A, completely possible, and B, is that a prudent endeavor? I don't know. It's
Right.
different for everyone, right? So you have to figure out that. But we have a lot of common risks that are just common sense that, okay, we need to eliminate that for a variety of reasons. Reputational, regulatory, a lot of it's just good business sense too.
Yeah, what I'm saying is, and I'm would like to get your feedback on this. What I'm saying is that CISO role is no longer quote unquote IT related, and it's really reaching the board level or
Yeah,
executive management, and it's
yeah.
become part of that conversation at the executive level because it's a business need now, and it impacts business, and business feedback is required to set up those strategies. Do you see the same thing? And by the way, that's a big change I've seen over the past 2 years. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And the thing is when I talk to my team, because there's the IT or the cyber folks, the practitioners, then there's your business constituents, other members of the C-suite, the board, what have you, or other business units within the organization that they're not technical people, or they're certainly not IT or cyber folks, right? They have business concerns, right? And so I tell my team, we have to stop just thinking about, okay, how are we going to find a palatable way to say no to someone, because that might be the best in our mind, or quickest or easiest way to eliminate what we may foresee in our maybe narrow focus. It's unnecessary risk. Like, we don't need to do that. Well, no, there might be a very legitimate strategic reason why they want to accomplish X. It's not just because it's cool or unique or flashy, right? There's innovation there, there's revenue streams, and they get it. It took a while, it was a journey, but my team now understands our job is to be a business enablement function, not a no function, right? So now we're coming at it, okay, how are we going to help them get to yes safely? Right. So this whole secure by design mantra, which I firmly believe in, you got to get in that conversation, the ground floor, or as quickly as possible. So I'm having more business units within our firm. They're inviting me to these meetings now saying,
Yeah,
Randall,
yeah,
we want to look at this SaaS platform for these reasons, right? What are your thoughts? Okay. And can we do this? More often than not, it's we can do this if we address these areas, right? And so we need to work with the vendor to, these are our concerns, or maybe the one you're looking at isn't the best fit, but they have a competitor that maybe has a similar feature set or checks most of your boxes, but they weren't recently breached, or they don't have these security gaps that I'm concerned with vendor A, right? It's those kinds of discussions. Or it might be development team saying, okay, we're working on a new dashboard or a new piece of software that we're being asked from, say, finance to accomplish these
precisely.
objectives. how do we do this securely? Was almost never considered maybe years ago, some years back, to be in those conversations. And now we're being brought in right away. Because what the last thing they want is, if I'm using a football analogy again, right? Okay, we're on the 20-yard line. Time to bring in cyber now. And they're going to tell us we're not going to be able to run that passing play or that play
Exact.
action, right? So let's not have the we need to now stop conversation. Let's be secure by design. I definitely think that has changed, and I'm glad we're not the only ones who can say that.
I think secure by design is a very nice term to use, and I'm going to be using it in every podcast and refer back to you, Randall, and say from what Randall says.
I don't think I originated or created it. I think I've seen it either said or I'm paraphrasing it, but
Yeah,
I thought that way without realizing it was
realizing. Yeah,
a phrase, right? But
phrase.
that's the mindset that I've been trying to approach these things from, and educating folks in my firm. Let's think of it in these terms. Like I said, it was a journey, but it's definitely now the norm as opposed to the outlier.
Well, Randall, we've reached the end of our podcast. Wonderful insight. It's really great to hear somebody that it's a leading edge, or maybe I should call it bleeding edge these days, with cybersecurity and protecting the company in an environment that's ever changing. Really appreciate your time, your feedback. I think that our audience is going to very much enjoy this. And I thank you very much for your time and sharing your feedback with us.
Thanks so much. I enjoyed it.